So our time in Colorado Springs, um, we have a lot of conflicting emotions about that time. Um, Church planting, rapid church growth, exciting, fun, concerts, contemporary music, music groups, getting to know um, the people in those groups, Children of the Day, um, Mustard Seed Faith, and all the others. People who are still really good friends to this day. Um, but the home life. On the surface, we kept it looking happy. Just under the surface, there was so much tension. Um, I felt put down and berated um, by my wife, like I couldn't do anything right, like I was back that little vulnerable kid with my father bursting in my room at night and berating me with a whole list of things that I'm doing wrong. I felt like that kind of thing was happening all over again. And I don't mean to blame Betty in any way. She was, um, as I mentioned, taken far away from her family and her support system. And most of the child care for the younger children was left to her. I got more involved with the kids as they got older. I would take time to be with each of them individually and explore the kinds of things that they liked to do. Um, and I got very involved when we discovered that Elliot, our oldest, had an extremely high genius level IQ. Um, we first began to notice that uh, when he was at an age when he should not have yet known how to read, and I was reading to him, and he said, uh, "Turn the page, Dad. I've already read that page." And I said, "No, you haven't." And he said, "Yeah, I have." And so I did my little test, and he not only read it, he read it faster than I was able to read, and he comprehended it in its entirety. Um, as a result of that, we had him tested, and the tests shocked me when they came back. This was a individual who was far smarter than I would ever be, and really it was a little bit scary. What do you do with a child like this? And yet at the same time, it was a source of pride for me. And looking back on it, I realize now that I started to kind of live vicariously through him. He had the brilliant mind that I would never have. He had the ability to accomplish things that I would never accomplish. Uh, the school system didn't know what to do with him. They had him skip some grades. They moved him from place to place. Um, Myself and some other parents of very, very bright children uh, started the first gifted and talented program in the city privately, apart from the schools. And we had a little gifted and talented organization. We were able to hire a director, and the director put together some um, beautiful teaching opportunities, learning opportunities for the kids. Elliot also got very involved in acting. There was a little acting company directed by a very artistic, hippie type person um, whom we all adored. And Elliot was quite the little actor. He had the lead in a production of Wind in the Willows. Um, and so was, active in that. He took courses when he was just a little guy. He took courses in high schools. He studied Latin in a all-girls Catholic school. He took mathematical courses um, in the public high school. He joined the German club, and he had lederhosen and learned how to do that slap dance thing that they do. He had no fear whatsoever. Our first trip with the kids to the Colorado ski resorts, I signed us up for, when I say us, I mean myself and the children, the three children, signed us up for downhill skiing lessons. Elliot wanted nothing to do with it. He skipped out on the lessons, snuck off when we weren't looking, while the rest of us were sliding down these little bunny slopes. He hopped on the chairlift, went all the way to the top of the mountain, and then came screaming down the double black diamond slopes, staying upright the whole way. Got to the bottom, realized he had no idea how to stop, and so he just crashed. No fear whatsoever. By that time, we had our fourth baby had been born. Joshua was born in Colorado Springs. And so Betty was tending to him while myself, Becky, Elliot, and Rachel went to the ski resort. Elliot also got into free climbing, rock climbing, with you're supposed to use ropes. He would do it without ropes. He would do it without partners, which is extremely dangerous. But again, just had no fear whatsoever, learned quickly. I remember one day he came home and told me, he said, "Dad, I can get us cable television for free." And I said, "Don't do that." I don't doubt you can, but don't. And he didn't. So we were trying our best to keep up with him and provide the opportunities, but boy, we didn't understand him. Tension built up between him and his mom, I think, especially. He, at one point, briefly ran away from home, was brought back by a neighbor, by a friend, who said, he's really hurting. And I reacted just by being embarrassed that he had, here I was the pastor of this big church, and this stuff wasn't supposed to happen. So I guess I did some denial there too. Marriage continued to disintegrate, and eventually, in spite of our covering it up, ended in divorce. Meanwhile, at church, our staff was growing, and there was a woman that I met at church, to whom I have now been married for 35 years. Kathy, from the very beginning, felt to me like a gift. Just being with her, I felt alive. I felt able to try new things. She encouraged me to write poetry. She encouraged me to take French lessons. She read books and shared with me what she had read, and was fascinated by literature and so on. And that was my attraction. to her. It was not a sexual attraction at first. I do think she's sexy. I think she's beautiful. Um, but it wasn't like, hey, look at, check her out. It wasn't that at all. It was an emotional, intellectual, beautiful kind of thing. Um, when my marriage was clearly over, when we had filed for divorce, I mean, it took, I don't know, a year and a half or something for it to work its way through the courts before it was final. But uh, when it was over, um, I felt um, like it was 100% my fault. I blamed myself entirely. Um, and that pain was so great that I became very angry and started blaming Betty entirely. And that doesn't work either. And I became extremely depressed. Um, and against the advice of wise people around me, I quit the ministry. I felt like I had to, like I had no business being a pastor. Part of the white conservative evangelical thing is that um, marriage is sacred and divorce is practically an unforgivable sin. And added to that, it's always the man's fault. That's implicitly taught. Remember, I'm in Colorado Springs. Later on, after I moved away, focused on the family, moved there. James Dobson, that whole thing. So there's reasons why he moved there, because there was an abundance of people they could hire. Self-blame, resigned from the church. Immediately, it seemed to me, there was widespread rejection of me, gossip, blaming. I felt like I had no friends other than Kathy. I mean, I felt like everybody was against me. They weren't. Everybody wasn't, but it felt that way. I felt like a complete failure. I took a job working nights in a psychiatric hospital. I took an apartment, which was a one-room apartment with no windows. Those are both good choices when you're depressed. I don't think I would have survived that time had it not been for Kathy's love and comfort and encouragement and friendship. Eventually, the marriage ended, and Kathy and I married. And I remember the minister who counseled us before the marriage telling me that she was a gift from God. And I remember my father, the one who is completely closed down and can't show any emotions whatsoever, telling me that, and this is a quote, he said, speaking of Kathy, she's the best thing that's ever happened to this family. He never told her that. I wish he had, but he did tell me that. We married. I got a different job working as a family therapist with families with adjudicated child abuse, working for the Department of Social Services, with a team of people that were counseling these families. We, with my parents' help, bought 40 acres outside of Colorado Springs, about 30-minute drive east of Colorado Springs, out on the plains. Old rundown farmhouse, dilapidated barns that were half made of sod, literally. Um, and there we established a new home and got the kids involved in 4-H and enrolled in school. Kathy and I had custody of Elliot and Rachel and Joshua. Joshua was about 8 years old at that time. So Rachel, a couple years older than that. Becky chose to live with her mother and was a very good caretaker of her mother and still is today. Her mother has some health problems, and Becky's very much involved in helping her today. It felt like I was coming up, it felt like I had been held underwater for a long time, and I was at last being allowed to come up and get some air. Kathy and I were married in August of 1985. The following February 11th, it was my 35th birthday. I was looking forward to having a birthday celebration with my family after work. I went to work in the counseling office, and about 10 o'clock in the morning, something like that, Elliot called me and said, Dad, I overslept and I missed the bus. And I said, well, you know, there's an old car or truck or something there at the farm. Take that if you want to go to school. If you'd rather stay home, take a day off. You know, he was a straight A student. He was on the varsity wrestling team. He had a steady girlfriend. Missing a day of school was nothing for him. He was younger than most juniors in high school. He was not quite 15 years old. But I don't think anybody really knew that, because physically he was the same age. Physically he was like the 17-year-olds. As I said, he was dating. He was accepted. He had friends. And he was a straight A student. So I said, you know, if you want to take the day off, go ahead. A couple hours later, the phone rang on my desk, and the voice on the other end said, "You got to come home right now," and hung up. I immediately called the house. A strange male voice answered, saying, Ellicott Volunteer Fire Department. I identified myself. I asked what was going on. He said, I can't give you any information. I screamed at him, and I said, give me a break. I'm 30 minutes away. What's going on? And he said, all I can tell you is we have one person down, and you should come home. A feeling of total dread, anticipatory horror flooded over me and stayed with me through that whole drive. I'll tell you what I found in our next video.